manufacturing driven.
Very much so.
And I listened to you cite the statistics about the economy, but most Americans don't feel good about the economy, do they?
No, and we don't tell people how to feel about the economy.
I mean, isn't it a fact that most people, if you ask them to define Bidenomics, they would say that's easy. We get to pay more to live worse.
I wouldn't touch
You don't want to answer that
a sentence with that word in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can pretty this up all we. I guess my point is, and I know you're going to do this anyway, but I'd be really careful with this economy. I mean, people just don't feel better off today. And one can marshal a persuasive argument that, well, you should, compared to Europe or compared to China, compared to Canada. But they, feelings are feelings. People don't feel good about this economy. And it's primarily because of inflation. Let me use my final 30 seconds to ask you. I listened to my good friend, the chairman, give his opening statement. Do you think inflation was caused by corporate greed?
I hate to comment on something the chairman was speaking about.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, so I will just say, we see at the Fed, we see inflation as when there's an imbalance between supply and demand. And we use our tools to work on the demand side of that and bring it back into line with supply.
I got 2 seconds. So when are you going to lower interest rates?
I'm today not going to be sending any signals about the timing of any future actions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith of Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Chair Powell. It's good to see you again. I want to follow up on kind of the line of questioning that Senator Tester was on a bit ago. He was talking about how the U.S. economy has been outperforming other advanced economies around the world in terms of growth rates, in terms of unemployment, in terms of inflation, getting inflation under control, though I think we obviously can all agree that we're not, at least from my perspective, we're not done yet, and we don't want to rest on our laurels, but I'm wondering if you could share what you think that we have learned from this experience. What have we done right, and why is it that we are doing better than some of the other advanced economies in the world?
I think that it's down to the fundamental strengths of our economy. So, as you may know, European economic officials are very, very focused on this question. They really, it comes up in all of our discussions. Europe has seen productivity increases of about 1% a year for 40 years. We've seen 2%. If you take a number and compound it at 1%, then compound it at 2%, the difference is just enormous after 40 years in terms of incomes and living standards. And their question is, why is that? Why is that? And the standard answer that Americans tend to give, and that I would give, is it's down to, more flexible labor markets. They, in the pandemic, people they stayed in their existing jobs. In the United States, we had people changing jobs at record levels, and that's the kind of thing that adds to productivity and contributes to rising living standards, going back to school, getting skills, and things like that. Another one is our financial sector. We don't just have banks. We have a highly developed ecosystem of financing sources that will fund early stage investments. Banks are really not set up to do that. They're prudentially regulated, and so those are some of the things. And I think we just have these natural strengths as an innovative, more flexible economy. We can grow faster.
I appreciate that. I think sometimes there's a tendency to sort of trash our economy and to sort of say, oh, we suck. And actually, I think that there's great resilience in our economy. I would argue that it has also to do a lot with the incredible resilience of our workers and their creativity and their talent and the training and the education that they have. And I think I would also argue, though I wouldn't expect you to make this case, that the way in which our federal government responded to the pandemic in order to make sure that people weren't evicted, that they still had money to pay their bills even when they weren't able to work, meant that the overall our economy,
بصوا يا جماعة، هو اللي أنا شايفه من وجهة نظري في الاجتماع ده بيحاولوا يتكلموا على الانفليشن وازاي ان التضخم مأثر تأثير جامد جدا جدا على الايكونومي وعلى الناس كمان. ان الناس دلوقتي شغالين او قاعدين باي تشيك باي باي تشيك، يعني الواحد بياخد المرتب بتاعه بيصرفه وما بيقدرش ان هو يحوش. الكونسيومر سبيندنج كمان، الناس اللي بتصرف بقت بتصرف اقل من الاول، فده بيأثر كمان على الشركات وعلى الدخل للايرادات بتاعت الشركات دي.
concern that may fall disproportionately on smaller banks. I think that commercial and regional banks hold an estimated 2/3 of all the commercial real estate loans in the country. And so unlike larger banks, these smaller institutions might find it a little harder to deal with this. So could you discuss this with us? Could you tell us a little bit about how you see this risk and particularly whether this poses some additional risk that we might be seeing more concentration in the banking sector as these smaller banks are maybe under more pressure?
Yes, so this, to your point, this is a risk that has been with us and will be with us for some time, probably for years. And banks need to be, honestly assessing what their risk is. They need to be assured that they have the capital and the liquidity and the systems in place to manage this risk. The stress test that we apply to the largest institutions stressed commercial real estate pretty hard. And again, the conclusion is that the large banks can manage this problem. And most small banks can too, but it is in some smaller banks that tend to have that local concentration in commercial real estate. And, we're in touch with those banks. The supervisors and regulators are in touch with those banks and making sure that they can manage them. And it's going to be an issue for many banks, but it's one that we're trying to work through, one that we're very much aware of. And again, it'll be with us for some time.
Thank you. I think so much about the importance of these small regional community banks in small towns, even big towns in Minnesota, and how important it is that, in my book, that they can stay independent and better serve their communities in that way. So I worry about this risk. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Smith. Senator Butler of California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, good to see you. And I am going to make you do the whole last 5 minutes, since I'm the last one for today. You'll recall the first time that we spoke, I tried to engage you around 3 specific areas. One was how the monetary policy impacts the quality of life for young Americans in the future.
خدوا بالكم علشان بتوع كاليفورنيا دول أصعب ناس.
And what I see as potentially a future challenge down the road, and that is the state of commercial real estate. You and I have had that conversation before, and no surprises today. I'm going to stick to those 3 topics. Somewhat related to questions that you've been asked before relative to the housing market, housing affordability, and interest rates. I want to narrow the scope just a little bit to ask about those issues and challenges impact, again, the quality of life for America's next generation. Given the severe shortage of affordable and available homes to buy, coupled with high interest rates, young Americans are continually unable to afford homes and are pushed into a rental market, driving rental costs up. So there is sort of trickle-down impact here. A recent Washington Post analysis showed that Gen Z is spending 31% more on housing than their millennial counterparts were 10 years ago after adjusting for inflation. How do you view, that was a long lead-in to just ask the question, how do you envision or view the interest rates of today and the monetary balancing, policy balancing that the Fed is doing on contributing to the future generation predicament if we are to extrapolate the conditions of today?
So our job, of course, is the whole economy and inflation for the whole economy. And the absolute best thing we can do for younger people is to restore price stability so that as we benefited from, I graduated from college in 1975, near the end of the big inflation period. So during most of my adult life, inflation has just been not a factor. And that means, stable interest rates, relatively low interest rates. We want to get back to that. And that is what the Fed's job is that we're we're not supposed to look at the housing market as separate from the overall economy. In the meantime, though, there's no question that higher interest rates are making it harder to buy homes in the short term. But in the longer term, this is the best thing particularly for younger people who are not yet in the housing market.
Let me sort of in line with that community, constituency, population, and definitely aligned with the concerns of my state that's actually facing some severe climate impacts, just as we speak with wildfires and our colleagues and fellow Americans in Texas and the impact of the hurricane. I wanted to pull in your sort of thoughts about the Fed pilot on the climate scenario exercise. In May, the Fed conducted a pilot climate scenario exercise and asked the 6 largest U.S. banks to examine their balance sheets and how it would be effective if a large hurricane hit the Northeast. They reported facing data gaps on property characteristics, their counterparties and insurance coverage. How does the Federal Reserve intend to invest in expanding the modeling resources for banks that are implementing climate-related financial disclosures?
So we haven't made any decisions on what to do with that information or whether to repeat that exercise. To your point, it was really a learning exercise. How are banks thinking about this, and how are they modeling it, and how does it work really? It's a very, very challenging thing to model. And so that was really the nature of this exercise. In terms of disclosures, we don't really have that's not really our job. That's really the SEC. So, but we don't have a big job on climate, but what it really is to make sure that the institutions we regulate are aware of and understand the risks that they run, including risks from climate.
And that they're prepared, and learning how to, as would be the point of a pilot, learning how to mitigate those risks over time. So what criteria will you use to evaluate whether or not you would run the exercise again and or share more broadly the results of that exercise?
I think we did publish, most of the results of that exercise. So I don't know what to say about that. We're looking at it and we're asking ourselves, what did we learn? What do we need to learn next time? So, I'm not exactly sure what factors we'll be looking at, but we'll be doing a careful assessment of what more we need to do.